Unity means lots of different things to different people. I can tell you in talking to thousands, they use many of the same words. And I think keywords are respect, maybe most important, communication, listening, and coming together on a team for a purpose or a goal. It does not mean unanimity. It does not mean uniformity. That is definitely not what unity is. Unity is respect, coming together, trying to find solutions.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Courageous Conversations about our schools. This is your host, Ken Feudernick, and my guest today, Adam Mizell, made a dramatic and unlikely career shift several years ago. He'd been a successful investment banker on Wall Street for about 30 years, and then a few years back, something changed. As I understand it, he found himself screaming at the television like many of the rest of us and thought, I have to do something about the toxic divides and the horrible mess we find ourselves in. Adam, welcome to Courageous Conversations about our schools.
Thanks for having me, and I look forward to talking about a lot of things that go on in our schools because clearly our youth is our future, and they're gonna, as I say to my own children who are now 24 and 21, I apologize that there's a lot of messes that our generation created that you're gonna have to fix. And so I'm doing my part to try to start fixing them, but a lot of it is up to our youth. And that actually gives me optimism because I'm optimistic when I look at kids today. So
Yeah, I can't wait for you to talk about what you're doing to make that happen. I'm interested in the shift you made away from what I imagine was a lucrative career. I'm also eager to learn about how exactly what you're doing to combat toxic divides, especially in the school settings. But first, what exactly were you screaming at when you were watching TV?
it was about 5 years, a little more than 5 years ago now. So that right after George Floyd had been killed. Um, and yeah, I was screaming at the news. I was screaming at anyone and everyone, mainly from the perspective that I'm like, I don't believe this is the America that we all live in, love, and respect. And this is a complicated country, so I don't say that from a naive place, but I'm like, we're better than this. I don't think we're this angry with each other and this divided and this, violent. And I was like, but something's got to change, and this isn't out of nowhere. And I kind of had my wife was sitting with me, and I joke, but I also mean seriously. It's always good if you marry someone smarter than yourself. And her answer, she's like, no one can hear you when you yell at the television. So what are you going to do? And we were in COVID, we were at that point, and I said, you know what? If some people like me with business, financial backgrounds, relationships, knowledge, experiences don't give time, not just a donation, and donations are important. Trust me, because I'm trying to raise money all the time for a not-for-profit, and it's hard. But you need people who give time and energy as well as you need people who give money, and obviously some of both. And so I said, I don't know what that means, but I've been an entrepreneur most of my professional life and I'll figure it out. So I said, I'm going to set out on this path to figure out what I can do with time and energy to make a difference and make impact. And that ultimately led to Us United.
Yeah, so we'll get into that in a minute. But you mentioned George Floyd and murder of George Floyd, and as I uh, recall reading something about your work, you had a chance to meet a sheriff named Chris Swanson. Can you just share a little bit about the story and meeting him and why that was significant, meeting the sheriff?
Chris is it's significant. I mean, the end of the story, he was co-founder with me of Us United. He's become one of my very close friends and partners. And so a life-changing relationship that I didn't know when we set out on the journey. And so another friend who was our third co-founder, who's since still good friend, but more is raising 5 kids, so is not nearly as involved in Us United as he would like to be. Then Ken Wadake Jr. introduced me to Chris. He said, Adam, you need to come with me and meet the sheriff in Flint, Michigan. And I was like, what are you talking about? Right? What? But I've learned in my life that when someone you trust and you respect invites you to a meeting or a call or asks you to do something, even if you don't really get it or think, you're like, why? I do it because what I found is the most interesting pivotal moments in my professional or personal life and career often come when you least expect it. So you go to those things. And so Ken said, Adam, come to Flint in November of 2020. I was like, all right, well, okay. um, and somehow in all of the news watching I was doing in May, I had missed Chris. And Chris became very well known and still is because on May 30th of 2020, he rolled up in Flint with a whole array of sheriff's deputies and law enforcement to a very large and brewing BLM protest, as many as were going on in cities across America that night. And then something very different happened. Chris looked at this, and now that as I got to know him authentically who he is, he took off his helmet, his body armor, his guns, and he walked into a pretty hostile crowd, saw one person he knew, and he walked in that crowd and he said, "What do you all want?" It's like, the people here, we all want to be with you. We agree with you. What do you want? And they started chanting, "Walk with us, walk with us." And he said, "All right, let's walk." And for 3 hours, he and his deputies marched arm in arm with what would have been a violent protest that grew to thousands of people as they saw what was going on. People just showed up, and CNN happened to be there, and 3.2 billion people in 24 hours saw one of the few examples of an American city that didn't burn that night. Um, and so I met Chris 6 months later, or about 6 months after that, and was blown away. I was like, this guy's the real deal. I mean, one of the things that shocked me in a good way is that, almost every law enforcement agency in the country, right? What's the motto? To protect and to serve. It's that we see on TV all the time. And okay, I go to Genesee County, Michigan. Every sheriff's deputy car uniform says to protect, to serve, and to unify. You just add those two words to the mission statement of law enforcement, you change the whole job. The whole job is different by adding two simple words. I said, this guy's the real deal. And that we sort of hit it off, and they put me on their podcast at the time and town hall and all kinds of things. And at the end of it, I said, I haven't risked my life the way either of you all have for, what we didn't yet define as unity, but what for bringing people together and confronting the divides and the violence in the country. I said, I'm not saying I'm opposed to risking my life. I haven't, but I'm really good at something, and that's writing business plans. And you've inspired me. I'm gonna go write a plan. I have some ideas. If you like it, we'll do it. If you don't, we'll figure something else out. And through a few evolutions, that plan is now what is Us United.
Talk about the plan you put together, and you created an organization called US United, and are promoting something called 30 for US, 30 for us. Tell our listeners about what those things are.
Sure. Well, to start, Us United is a movement to build unity in America by giving everyday Americans the tools and resources they need to reunite our country. I think, and I heard this loud and clear this summer driving across the country, but even before that, most all of us understand that unity today is not coming from our political leaders or from our media. They're incentivized for lots of reasons, both financial and business, as well as power, to not do that. And it's up to us. We are a democracy. It's still we the people to figure out how we then do that. So we started Us United from that perspective. And I think at the core of it, and this will blend into 30 for us, one of our observations is that almost all of us live and work in social media in ever shrinking bubbles. And outside of those bubbles, we categorize and then we label people. And none of that is bad. I don't say that as a criticism of anyone or anything. It is human nature, is how we process the world. But I don't know about you, but I have not found many people who will ever sympathize or compromise with a label. We're going to do that with another human being in some kind of person to person contact discussion. That can be this on a Zoom. That can be coffee. It could be dinner. It could be volunteering somewhere. It could be anything. But your humanity, your unity comes from human interaction, not from social media and labels and what you hear or read on TV or see on TV. And so it's part of the core of Us United. And so we've designed a whole array of programs and content and execution to try to change culture around that and try to bring people together. One of them, as you alluded to, is something called 30 for Us, which we started a couple of years ago, with the simple insight of exactly that. Say, well, how do we get people out of their bubbles? And I'll take credit and blame for the idea, and it's certainly been refined as everything is. But I said, what if you every month invite anybody and everybody in America to a Zoom like this, big Zoom call? And we have a little bit of structure. But Ice United will have a topic often taken from relatively current events or issues that are of debate and discussion, put it out there. And ultimately, we're going to put you in a breakout room of five random Americans with this topic, a little bit of an icebreaker, a little bit of a process, but the bulk of your 30-minute conversation is around whatever the topic is. We did one on, hey, climate change feels huge. And there's data on surveys, of what people think about it. And the vast majority of Americans understand it's man-made, but 80% of people do nothing about it because it feels too big. Like it's not, I can't do this. Someone else has got to figure it out. I don't accept that. And the question really was, okay, what is something even small that any and every American could do that could help a little bit with climate change? And people in a breakout room and they have that discussion, right? Another one is if you were president for the day, which one change you would make? Super interesting conversation. Talk to five people. You sitting outside Sacramento, you're going to be with someone from, I don't know, a Republican from Dallas, Texas, a liberal 23-year-old college student in Boston, a gay man in Miami, and I don't know, a farmer in Des Moines. It doesn't matter. America, you're going to learn very different things because we've all had different experiences. So we created that 30 for us. We do it both in Zooms, we do it in person as a structure to help people break out of bubbles and have conversations, listen, learn, and grow. And it's been incredibly impactful as one example of the things that we do.
You've done this in school settings, high school and university settings too. And I'm curious to have you describe what it looks like in a high school setting. Maybe you can share an example of when you've been part of one and what the topic was and how you prevent people from sort of sometimes doing what people will do, which is to sort of break the rules and get angry and get contemptuous of people who have different views. And how do you, I assume that you've got sort of some guardrails that you set up to try to prevent that, but share an example of how this played out in a high school.
Sure. I mean, well, basically, when we've done them in high schools in person, um, two different ways, and there's no right or wrong. One where you take a couple of classes and you divide kids up across classes into groups of five. And so a little different because often they do know each other more than you and me being on a random Zoom, but still not deep relationships. And you mix the groups and you always start with an icebreaker, a friendly one of, you know, you know, what's your favorite Halloween costume, or what's your favorite, what do you like? One of them was like, we look forward to more in the fall, pumpkin spice lattes or football, right? And why? I mean, whatever it is, just break the ice a little bit, and then you have your topic and the structure. You end up in the breakout sessions. Each person is given a minute and a half or 2 minutes to provide an answer. So, hey, if you were president for the day, what's one change you would make? And the starting this message is let every person answer the topic about 10 minutes in total, right? Don't interrupt. Ask a question if you really don't understand, but this is their opportunity to express their thoughts and their views on whatever the question is. Go around, everyone's done that. Then you have open discussion for 15 minutes where people ask questions, build on each other. And the only basic rules are being polite, not name calling, not talking over people, and having conversation, and just see what happens. And invariably, the magic that happens in almost every 30 for us session that I've been in is that the group starts to coalesce around one or two about out of those five answers, the group coalesces around one that's really interesting, or one or two in some way that's combined to sort of build towards a consensus discussion. Not always, but usually. And so in high school, that's particularly powerful because these kids are thinking about, what do you mean? What I mean, one, they're focused on more current events than we give them credit for. But two, you can think of any issues that cut across schools. I mean, we did it at my daughter's school when we lived in Los Angeles, and there was a lot at the time. There was a lot of some race. There was a racial tension, a racial issue, or someone written something in the girls' bathroom. Well, you had a ready-made discussion of, you know, not the right or wrong of that, but how should the school react effectively? And you allow these kids to have agency and voice. And one of the things we always try to do, we do it when we do these online, but in person, is publish we ask everyone at the end in a survey, is like, what was the best answer, the most interesting answer to the prompt that came out of your group? And we try to share those ideas because often you find the best ideas in solving problems come from people closest to the problems. So it's not just an intellectual exercise, it's one that's designed to say there's what you all talk about is now going to have feedback in your school, right? The administration can ignore it or not, but here are the, and invariably you'll have a commonality. Usually there's two or three things that come up a bunch, and so you start to see consensus on an issue instead of ideas. And so what makes it powerful in that setting is you're giving the students a voice, and you're giving them a voice collectively where they're learning from each other to come to answers and ideas. And what did you just teach? We just taught civil discourse. We just taught problem solving, and we just taught democracy in many ways. And so that's one example of, and I'll give you another one in a second, but I can tell you would love to ask me a
Yeah.
question.
Uh,
So
well, it got me thinking about a lot of things. Uh, I'm actually a school board member now. I've been on a school board for about a year now in Northern California, and we have some student school board members from high schools in our county that we're on. And one of them shared a very poignant, very troubling story about a peer at their high school who had committed suicide recently. And it got me thinking, I would really like to know from this group of four board members that were high school students what they think the chief contributors to mental health challenges are. And I said, is it social media? What is it? And some of them said, yeah, there's bullying and teasing that goes on there. But several, I think two or three of the four students said it's this sense that kids come to school and they don't feel that they're heard, they don't feel they belong, they're lonely, they're just isolated. And there isn't the kind of culture in some cases that welcomes them and makes them feel that they belong. And I'm thinking that what you're 30 for us, in addition to these conversations and having better conversations about topics that kids care about, just feeling like they have a voice, that people care what they think, might mitigate some of these pressures in the sense of loneliness and isolation that some kids feel. Do you find that to be true?
1,000%. I think that's incredibly insightful. Both of the students who told you that, but I think you're exactly right, which is, their way. I mean, the point of 30 for us is it's ways for communities to come together and for people to be heard. You know, an incredibly powerful example of when we did this at a university level. Back to my partner Chris, he teaches at University of Michigan Flint, and so early on in testing 30 for us, we did this with his class, and it's still one of the most memorable sessions that I've ever been in. We had five students, and since U of M Flint is a little more of a commuter college, ranging from 18 to like 26, 27, there's one black woman, one Latino, and three white kids. They knew each other a bit, but still not tons. I mean, and the topic was, if you were president for the day, which one change you would make? Each person was going around answering. And I think the third person to answer, a black woman who was 26, and she was going back to school for pre-med because she wanted to go to medical school. And she said her answer was, if I were president for the day, I would truly really ban redlining and not allow it to happen, which is an interesting answer in of itself. But then what happened next was powerful. The other four kids said, what's redlining? And she proceeded to explain what it is in incredibly personal and powerful terms of how over 40 years redlining had so impacted her family, causing them to lose homes, to move, to not be able to create wealth, and left them in a very vulnerable position, which was moving. All of the students talked about it. At the end of that 30 for us session, all five of them said, we agree, if we were president, we would ban redlining. That never happens. If you saw something on TV, on the news, if there was social media posts, you read about it, never would you get to that place. And the power was one person telling a poignant personal experience and story of what, in this example, redlining did to her and her family. And I think that's true of almost any issue in America. And this, I mean, what I've seen in so many conversations is that When you share your experiences, people listen. We are humans, we are storytellers. That's how we communicate. And no one can tell you your story's wrong. It's your lived experience. They're going to learn from it and understand from it. And so, to your example, that's what 30 for us can do is giving that ability to share an experience and having people hopefully understand it and tell you they understand it, which is so important to, you know, whatever the issue from obviously suicide or anything else, because you got to be heard. And then you are.
Such an important lesson there. I think what I recall, you probably recall from being in school, is that when these kinds of things would happen, they would sometimes happen in a debate format where you get an issue, it could have been capital punishment, it could have been anything, whatever the issue of the day was, and you get people lined up on both sides and they develop their arguments and they get up and make their arguments. No personal experience typically, because that is sort of considered irrelevant in a making a case for in a debate, and yet what your purpose is to win the debate, and it's not to listen to the other side. You would never, if you're a debate coach, allow one of your students or encourage them to say, "Gee, I heard you say something that really resonated for me, and I think I want to ponder that a bit, or I think I actually agree with you." But the kind of setting that you described, where people are encouraged to start with their own personal experience, and then other people, their job is to listen and to ask questions, to be curious, not to prove them wrong as one would in a debate. Uh, Incredibly important things can emerge from those kinds of conversations. As you say, you can't really argue with someone's personal experience. And when people hear that, they're more likely to open up and empathize and say, I had never imagined someone having that experience, and I can see how you would be in favor of this policy or that policy. And I might actually agree with you, which is what happened in the case of the redlining discussion.
Right. And that's the point, right?
Mm.
That's the point. Because all of us have different experiences.
Yeah. I think one of the things that you're alluding to that I've become more appreciative of is the need to get people with different backgrounds in the same room together.
Agreed. I mean, I think that's why we started 30 for us. And I think go back to the school setting. Um, One of the ways to even do that is between schools, right? You could do it within a city area. Say, hey, we've got two big rivals in football in Sacramento. It's the big game. Before or after, we're going to do 30 for us's with students and teachers from each of those rival schools. And basically the messaging, we can be rivals on the field and pound on each other and whoop whoop it up for 3 hours, but outside of that we're still friends, or we can find ways to be friends. And so I think that's an interesting application. But the other one is exactly what you said: across the country, have sister schools, brother schools, whatever you want to say. And hey, we're going to do 30 for us on Zooms with our students in Sacramento and a school in Texas or a school in Iowa or a school in New Jersey. It doesn't matter. And we're going to talk to kids somewhere else in America through Zoom and find those. It could be on suicide, it could be on any issue. But now we've connected and we've heard completely different perspectives through this structure, and you create these programs. And I think that's exactly how you build the bridges. And so that's what's so powerful about the school settings, because I think there's a natural kind of willingness to want to understand what kids in high school are doing in different
Yeah.
parts of the country. And let's talk about it.
Yeah. You mentioned football. I've often gone to high school football games up where we live, and it's a somewhat homogeneous community. But then you get people that drive for miles away. Their families come up and watch the football game. One group sits on one side, one group on the other, and we do what, has become sort of a part of Americana. We have a football game on Friday night. And yet, uh, there's this missed opportunity, it seems to me, for people, families to get together, as you say, before or after the game and have a picnic or a gathering. I mean, they don't even have to have a conversation about some topic. It's just about being together. But in fact, the buses come up, people come up on and support their team, and then they leave. And it seems to me like just a real missed opportunity.
1,000%. Sports are one of the few remaining big unifiers left in this country. Sports, music, food are probably three of the biggest. So one of the things we're doing at Us United is a program to create unity seats at every football game. I'm talking to a bunch of NFL teams about this right now, but it can apply all the way down to the high school level. And so you take 4 or 6 seats and you set them aside and you invite, and we do this because through our partnership with sheriffs in the communities, but in the high school setting, it could be it might not that might not be the appropriate way to do it. It is, I think, at the NFL level or the college level, but you invite two families who on the surface seem incredibly different. Now that could be one roots for one team, one roots for the other team, and they're in the unity seats. That could be they just don't know each other in their community. They're very white, black, Jewish, Arab, gay, straight, old, young, whatever it is. Like on the surface, you think they're different. Let's bring these people together in the unity seats, cheering for their favorite team and talking to each other. I promise at the end of that game, they're friends. And that's what sports can do. And we should put them on the Jumbotron, talk to them before and after, share that content, share the stories. What did you learn? And are you going to talk to each other afterwards? You're going to be friends now in some way, shape, or form. The answer is always going to be yes, almost always, right? But we came together for 3 hours. We cheered over something we had in common and we built a relationship. That's the message. And unity got me seats at the 49ers game or the Rams game or, whatever it's going to be, not division, right? And now I want to be part of that. And now that I want to be part of that culture. And that's how you do it. That's how you make change.
I just want to one final thing I want to run by you and get your thoughts about is this idea of unity for some people that I think don't necessarily understand the way that you might mean it or I might mean it. Think that what you're asking them to do is to come together and pretend that we don't have differences. And unifying people, I think the way that I understand you mean it is that we're sort of recognizing one another's humanity. It doesn't mean that we are necessarily a part of the same political party or that there aren't things that we would disagree with when it comes to, say, immigration or uh, any number of things that are going on in the country, or even, policing and what's the right role for the public safety people to play. So talk a little bit about if the pushback you might get from someone who says, I don't want to unify with those people because I can't stand what they stand for.
Sure. Um, well, a couple things. First of all, I agree with you. I mean, and we probably should have started at the beginning saying this. Unity means lots of different things to different people. I can tell you in talking to thousands, they use many of the same words. And I think keywords are respect, maybe most important, communication, listening, and coming together on a team for a purpose or a goal. It does not mean unanimity. It does not mean uniformity. That is definitely not what unity is. Unity is respect, coming together, trying to find solutions. Way back at the very, 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 very beginning of Us United, this is 5 years ago plus now, when I was probably still learning what the heck we were doing and talking about. I was invited to an event and had a conversation about unity with um, a person, and she was very aggressive in saying, "Well, what is unit? What is your definition of unity?" She's like, "Hitler had unity." She's like, "I wasn't getting. I'm not unifying with that." She's like, "Racism. I'm not unifying with that." And I didn't answer it well because I was still learning. But the answer really is what I just said. It is respect. It is communication. It's listening, and it's finding areas of common ground you can build upon. There are things that you're not supposed to agree to, nor should you. My friend Ken has very similar stories of conversations he's had unexpectedly when he's been out and about, given his work. That you cannot make change without communication and without respect. If you respect somebody, you can go a long way. Again, respect again is not agreement, but it is. I want to hear what you have to say. I respect who you are as a human. I want to listen. I want to learn, and I want to then go and grow from there. You're not going to change, pick your issue, racism. You're not going to change, war in Ukraine. You're not going to change wars in Gaza. You're not going to change abort, whatever it is, by just saying, F you, I'm walking away. I'm right, you're wrong. It's not going to happen.
In fact, you can make things worse. And Tim Shriver, who I interviewed for this podcast, uh, has an organization called Unite, very similar to your organization. And he helped develop something called the Dignity Index. But the idea is that we can and we should have disagreements. They're part of what America's always been about. He said what we can't have, though, that what is very un-American or is not good for America, not good for our relationships, is contempt. So if we can figure out a way to pull contempt out of our interactions and still have disagreements and sometimes find common ground, then good things will come of that. And the one thing he said that I think is pretty persuasive for, and I share this with people that say, I just uh, hate those people so much for what they believe in. I tell them something Tim Shriver told me, which is really stuck in my mind as a sort of a profound truth that if we have contempt for them, there will be more them. Or if you have contempt, you make an enemy for your cause. So if you really care about your cause, the last thing you want to do is hold other people in contempt for not agreeing with you because they'll just dig in their heels and even become more convinced that they're right and you're wrong.
Totally agree. And I've talked to Tim a number of times. And I agree with that. And I think that it's back to why I always say tell a personal story. Because if you say I'm right and you're wrong and this is why, nobody's going anywhere. If you share that story, you can make progress in opinion. And the positive word I would use to what Tim said is one of the things I think that has made America a unique and great country over time, as a country, and really that means as a people, we have much more empathy than many, many other people and places in the world. And if you're not agreeing with someone, have some empathy. Try to understand why they feel how they feel. Ask those questions. Ask them from a place of true openness, and you'll learn. And then they'll open back to you, and you can share your story, your feeling, your experience. And that is where you don't create contempt, you create a friend. You don't have to agree, but you've created someone saying, I respect that person because they asked, they listened, and they shared. And that is how we move forward. And that is what we have to get back to.
There's a guy, Dylan Marin, who's a podcaster and author of a book called Conversations with People Who Hate Me. And one of the things he did was start to reach out, not to the people that followed him that loved what he was doing and saying on his podcast, but a few people were writing in with just vile messages of hate. And he said, I want to talk to those people. And he tried to use empathy, but one of the really, I think, profound observations he had is that empathy is not endorsement. It doesn't mean that when you try to understand where someone's coming from, that you endorse what they believe. But in fact, when he showed empathy to these people, invariably, these people that had written hateful messages to him would apologize when they heard Dylan say, it hurts when you say, I wish you would burn in hell forever, because you believe this or you're that. And those people, when they heard him say that, and it wasn't in the safe confines of social media behind a screen, they would say, I'm sorry. And he would say, well, can you help me understand what would motivate you? And often it came down to people that had been bullied themselves that were, this goes back to the saying, hurt people hurt people. But he would become friends with some of these people who, weeks earlier had been saying things that would damn them to hell forever. So I this idea of unity does not mean unanimity. This empathy does not mean endorsement. It's an important, really critical nuance that we try to to convey to people so that they don't get this idea we're just saying, look, we all agree and can't we just all get along? It's a little more complicated than that.
It would be a boring place if that were the case. It's just not possible, but it would be.
Yeah.
I mean, we talk about unity and diversity and lots of cliches. I mean, the other thing that goes with all of this, and I said this a lot on our travels this summer, and I say it to everyone: unity starts with yourself. And what I mean by that is you cannot really connect with, empathize with, build unity with other people if you don't have a level of just consciousness and happiness in and of yourself. I mean, if you're angry, if you're unhappy, if you're sad, you're mad, how are you going to be able to be patient and connecting with other people? It's really hard. So, for everyone, starting just a little bit with yourself, a little bit of self care and a little bit of self love is step one to being able to do that with other people. And I think that's often lost and not talked a lot about because there's an American toughness. Is that we hide things. I mean, and understandably, but like you don't have to go expose your deepest, darkest secrets to unify people, but you do have to figure out how to take care of yourself and make yourself happy enough that you're able to then go be open and accepting of other people. It's really important.
Yeah, well, let's leave it there. I just appreciate your work so much that you're wanting to bring this stuff down to the level of young people because they are our future. It's harder to make these changes sometimes when you've been around on the planet a long time, but young people, I think, get this, and I think there's no better place than our schools to start having these conversations, to introduce these ideas, to identify situations where people aren't doing it and are starting to develop this sense of contempt, maybe because it's fun to tease other people. It seems very innocent. We've always done that, but that's the place where I think we need to start uh, developing, cultivating this idea of unity and dignity uh, towards others, towards our classmates.
Look, they are our future, right? As I said before, I mean, our generation and our parents, we did a lot of good things, but we've obviously put ourselves in some bad places. We can start, but the future is in the youth, and giving them the support and the tools and resources to be able to make those changes is one of the most important things we can do in our work. So I agree with you 1,000%.
Well, Adam, thanks so much for joining me on Courageous Conversations about our schools. You can find this episode along with links to Adam's website and some other notes at schoolconversations.org. You will find all of our nearly 50 episodes there, as well as on your favorite podcasting platforms. Bye, everyone.